Welcome back to SleeplessRonin Plays. Today, I'm doing my third video in a series of 4 about ranking the various items in Technical Readout 3058. Today's ranking list is going to be comprised of the 32 vehicles in the book. These vehicles are only inner-sphere vehicles, so there's going to be no clan vehicles to muddle the waters. Just 5 tiers of 32 inner-sphere vehicles. Okay, we've got our 5 tiers. Our top tier is Supreme Performance. Because, cars, everybody talks about performance vehicles, so I kind of with performance is the theme for this one. Then we have Above Average Performance, Average Performance, Needs Help Performing, and Below... No, wait a second. There we go. I had my orders messed up. There we are. Should say Average Performance, Below Average Performance, and Needs Help Performing. I also hope we have no vehicle that falls in the category because I relatively like vehicles. I use them quite often in my campaigns I run because their battle value is very low compared to mechs. I mean, some really heavy vehicles, like the LRM Carrier that weighs like 60 tons, has a battle value lower than most versions of the Raven battle mech. So vehicles are relatively cheap to take in mass and can really screw up your player's days if they work right. A good couple of LRM carriers can truly screw up a player's day. An SRM carrier is one of the most frightening things in the battlefield. We'll get to those, don't worry. But we gotta start at the beginning. And the very first thing we have is our little bitty, tiny, 10-ton Sprint Scout helicopter. This is a Scout helicopter. It is extremely fast at 1320 for its speed. So it's got that. It has almost no armor because if it's being hit, it's gonna go down. But its job is not to be a combat vehicle. It's got a beagle active probe and a tag. It only goes in there to scout and then to draw artillery. I mean arrow for artillery or indirect fire missiles if you're playing those in later eras. For its group, I'm going to say for a scout, it's going to be hard to beat this as a scout. Remember, we're looking at the vehicle's performances in the roles they're going to play kind of thing. We're not worried about anything else. For a scout, this is a very good scout. It's hard to beat a vehicle that can go 20 hexes. Now you're going to be making some side slip rolls when you're getting really fast and trying to turn. Do your turns early, then go in a straight line. Sprint Scout helicopter. It's a good scout. Next up, we've got the Centipede Scout Car. It weighs 20 tons. It only moves 812. It has a lot more armor than the thing, and it's a hover vehicle. Hover vehicles have the same kind of issues that the VTOLs have, where you're going to make a lot of avoiding side slips. This thing has weaponry on it though, which is kind of a bit odd. It also has 0.4 tons of cargo. I don't get that. So yeah, strange. But it has a medium laser and a vehicle flamer with ammo. So I actually think that it's not nearly as good as a scout helicopter because it's a lot slower, 812. And it spends tonnage on weaponry, and it also doesn't have a tag. I mean, not all scouts need tag, but thank goodness it has a BAP. Because if it didn't have a BAP, it wouldn't even be worthy of a scout at all. But at least it's a scout. I'm going to say this is pretty much an average performing scout. It's nowhere near as good as the helicopter, in my opinion. It weighs twice as much, has a lot more armor, but it's not really scouting as much. It's got guns on it, and that's... I don't know. I don't think your scouts need guns. Your scout vehicles don't need guns. Next up is the Warrior H8 attack helicopter. I love the way this thing actually looks. This is one of the cooler looking vehicle pictures in the book. Honestly, this is pretty cool looking. This is a fun looking vehicle. I just wish it didn't have such a terrible loadout of weapons. It's an attack helicopter, right? It moves 10-15 because VTOLs move fast. We always want good speedy VTOLs because every time you hit the propeller, they get slower. The propeller's only got 2 points of armor on every VTOL, and then it just gone, more or less. So yeah, propellers just get shredded. Thankfully, they don't take a lot of damage from weapons. Most weapons do like a point to them. But then you fire cluster ammunition off of an LBX autocannon, and you just rip helicopters out of the air with your shotgun. It's like shooting skeet. But this thing's problem is being an attack helicopter. Its loadout is an LRM-5 and 2 Streak SRM-2s. For that stuff, give me an SRM-4 and an SRM-6. Maybe, actually no, screw that. 2 SRM-6s and a ton of ammo. It's not going to fight for very long, but it doesn't need to be in there very long. I'd much prefer that. I like the way it looks. I don't think it's a very good attacker. It doesn't really live up to its name. I think this actually, sadly, is a little bit on the below average performing category. It could be better. We're going to see attack helicopters that really live up to their name. Next up, we have the Blizzard Hover Transport. This is actually pretty darn good. It's a 914 hovercraft with not a lot of armor, but its job is to get infantry in and leave and let them go, and get the heck out of there. Then it has an LRM-5 as a support weapon, which is a little bit strange. I mean, yay, you can do a little bit of harassment with the LRM-5, that's fine, but it carries 6 tons of infantry, which means that for whatever faction is running this, if these are like being used by in a sphere, you can take like 2 solid, like the 3-ton platoons or whatever. That's pretty darn good. Or you can take battle armor, including some of the ones that weigh take the 4-man unit that weighs 1.5 tons of battle armor. You can take a full unit of those. You can carry a Word of Blake 6-man or a Comstar 6-man battle armor unit that has each 1-ton guys for 6 of them. So this thing's actually really darn good at carrying infantry. So, being our very first infantry carrier or transport, this thing's got supreme performance. At 914, it's got a good solid cargo hold. That's what we're looking for in a transport. We want those things to get in, drop off the infantry, and get out. Next up, we have the Cavalry Attack Helicopter. This is an attack helicopter. It's 1015, so the same speed as the Warrior H8. It's got okay armor. No VTOL is going to have a lot of armor on it. It's just the way a VTOL works. VTOLs don't take damage. They just really don't. But this thing actually has the weapons I was asking for, more or less. It has an SRM-6 and then doofily 3 SRM-2s. Why not just 2 SRM-6s? I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, 2 SRM-6s would have been a lot better than 3 SRM-2s and SRM-6. And I really wonder if this isn't a case of literally the rules for the thing trying to match the image. I mean, if you look at it, it's got a 6 rack on the bottom of it, and then a little 2 rack on the nose. So maybe it's like 2, 2, 2, 2. And that's my guess, is that this is actually a case of rules trying to look like the image. That's fine. You could have just started with a 6 rack and not even had those on there and just had 2 6 racks behind each other. That'd have been a lot better. That would have been a very good helicopter. As it is, this is going to be a lot better than the Warrior H8. I'm going to give this one an above average performance rating because it's fast and it's got good SRM loadout. I mean, I wish it had 2 6s, but I'll take what it has. It's pretty darn good. Next up, we have the Kestrel VTOL. It's a 1218 with 2 machine guns and 3.5 tons of infantry space, cargo infantry space. That's a really strange tonnage because there are infantry squads and platoons and stuff like that you can fit in there at the 3 tons. But 3.5 tons, the 0.5 seems like such a garbage waste on it. I don't know what the 0.5 is in there for. I mean, honestly, this thing would have been a lot better if it had just had no weapons on it and had 5 tons of infantry capacity. Or at least 4 tons. I mean, you get that in there, you can carry a battle armor squad at 4 tons. So this being 3.5, you really cut out that ability to carry battle armor. Which will be, by the way, the 4th video in this series. We'll be discussing battle armor. So, the Kestrel is going to get in the below average performance area because that number is just strange. It's a half a ton off of being good enough to be average performance. It's just lacking that ability to even get a squad of battle armor into the field. Next up, we have the Badger Tracked Transport. Now, this is our first tracked vehicle, so tracked vehicles tend to travel slower than any of the other varieties of vehicles, but they also don't take motive critical hits nearly as easily. And anybody that runs a lot of vehicles knows that immobilized vehicles is a very common occurrence on the battlefield. If you're being shot in the front, 5s and 9s are motive criticals on the sides. Actually, 5s and 9s are always potential motive criticals. And any potential motive critical, especially in a hover or a wheeled vehicle, even an average roll has the potential to really screw up your vehicle's day and seriously slice into its speed. So, being tracked means you're a little bit more durable against those motive crits, which are going to come up extensively. Motive crits are commonplace. So the Badger only moves at 6'9". It's a little bit slow, but it actually has okay armor for a transport at its weight of 30 tons. It's got 80 points of armor, which is okay. It's not terrible, it's not bad. Beneficially, it has 4. Interestingly, this is an Omni vehicle. This is an Omni vehicle, yes. But most importantly, it carries a full 4 tons of fixed cargo infantry space. That's very important because, again, we're talking about being able to deliver an average battle armor squad for the Inner Sphere, which is 4 men and a ton of guy for like the Inner Sphere battle armor average one, into the front lines on this vehicle. That means it's good. And then every configuration has weapons. The primary one has basic mediums and SRM2s. Other ones have a lot of SRMs on them. Some of them SRM4s, LRMs, laser variants. Some of them add space of cargo infantry. There's one version that has a total of 7.5 tons of cargo and infantry, which is a big amount of infantry. I mean, that's extensive. So it's really, really well done. This is I'm going to put this one into above average performance just because it is a little bit slow. 6'9" is not bad, but it is a bit slow for getting your infantry in there. Like I said, infantry in, out. In. I'm going to stop saying this now. Next up is the Galleon light tank. I personally run these a lot because they are super cheap on the battle value. I mean, this variant in the book is a 393 battle value, so it's really cheap on the battle value. It's got a speed of 711, which is pretty good. The ones I've been running recently in my campaign are the 6'9s, the older ones, like the 3025 era Galleons, which means they're even weaker. And this thing's got a bunch of medium lasers, medium pulse laser, and a B-galactic probe. The B-galactic probe is pretty good. The goofy thing is the lasers are on the left and the right side, so they're not firing forward. And you have a turret, so essentially you can only bring 2 of these guns to bear on one target, and then you have to pick another target out the other side to hit with the other gun. It's a bit strange. I mean, I don't know why they just didn't stick all the weapons in the turret on this thing. Again, it could be art, or rules influencing the art, but overall though, it's got decent enough armor where it can take a Gauss shell to any one direction on it, and still keep going. It's got a pretty good speed, it's tracked so it can go through all kinds of terrain, and its weapons are pretty solid. I mean, for a little bitty light tank at only 30 tons, it's a good harassing tank. I'm going to say the Galleon is above average performing tank for its weight class. Also, it performs the role of a scout in addition because it has the B-galactic probe. Next up is the Karnov UR Transport. Here we go again, another VTOL, 30-ton VTOL, moves at 1015, has machine gun and machine gun ammo, or 2 machine guns and a ton of machine gun ammo. Honestly, that's wasted again. These point defense weaponry, they keep throwing these things are just not necessary. I mean, what are they going to do? It has 7 tons of infantry space. If it had 8 tons of infantry space, this thing would be truly fantastic for your average Inner Sphere house. You could then bring in and drop off 2 platoons of battle armor. As it is, you can drop off one of the heavier platoons, one of the ones that weighs up to 1.5 tons per soldier. You can drop off any one of these, the ones that like a Word of Blake / Comstar 6-man 1-tonners. You can bring battle armor and a unit of infantry that weighs only 3 tons. So it actually is a pretty darn good transport overall. This thing can carry a lot of stuff in there. And that's pretty good. I mean, I got good speed at 10-15, so you really get in there, zip in, drop the land, drop the infantry off, and get the heck out of Dodge. So I'm gonna say that Karnov is an above average performing vehicle because it really is. It's just that machine guns that aren't necessary on it that just really kind of drag it down a little bit for me, and not all that much. Next up, we have the Peregrine Attack VTOL. This is a very fast attack VTOL. It moves at 1218. It weighs 30 tons. You'll notice, we're really stuck on 30 tons for these vehicles. We have a lot of vehicles at this 30-ton weight. This thing has no armor. I mean, it only has a half a ton of armor. And it's listed as an attack VTOL. If it gets shot at, and by any weapon in the game more or less, it's going down. And it's hit. It's going down. Now, 1218 gives it a good defensive modifier if you're keeping that speed up. And because you're a VTOL, you've got the additional defenses on there. But no armor is really scary, especially for a VTOL. I mean, when you're... Yeah, it's just crazy. Weaponry, I mean, it has 2 machine guns again, and a ton of machine gun ammo. That right there is 2 tons that could have been dedicated to armor that would have been far better than what it has. It has also 2 SRM4s, which is good. I'd prefer 6s, which of course you could have put into 6s if you didn't have the machine gun ammo and machine guns. So the machine guns really hurt this thing. The problem is, again, like I said, even though this is an attack VTOL, if it gets hit by about anything, it is dead. So, I'm sorry, this thing needs help performing. I don't see it actually surviving a round of combat. I mean, it's not good. Just not very good. But, oh, no, this vehicle just bothers me. Because it has no protection. It's a VTOL. VTOLs don't last too long because they lose their helicopter blades and they go down, but having it where it's literally designed like a small laser rips this thing to shreds hurts me, and I don't like that. Which is completely opposite of the next vehicle we're going to look at. This is, so let's go back, I want to go for a moment. The Peregrine attack VTOL is a battle value of 521, which is, I think, way too high for what that thing is. Contrasting with the next one we have, which has a battle value of 1,110. This is actually one of the better vehicle battle values in the book. And it's on the Yellow Jacket Gunship. This thing moves at 6'9", but that's fine. It has armor. Only 3.5 tons of armor, 56 points, that's fine also. You see, what makes this thing truly insane is this is a VTOL that carries a Gauss rifle and 2 tons of ammunition. This is your ultimate pop shooter. It flies up, just rises above the terrain, fires its Gauss rifle, and next turn then gets the heck out of dodge. Finds a good terrain, flies up behind the train, pops up just to fire that Gauss rifle, and then flies the heck out of dodge. This thing is amazing. A lance of these stupid things is a terror on the battlefield. Gauss rifles are always just good. Gauss rifles are good in mechs. Gauss rifles are really good on vehicles because they don't require the heat sinks again, the heat sink on the Gauss rifle. So they get to save 1 whole ton, but it doesn't matter. A VTOL with a Gauss rifle is a scary, scary thing. This is amazing. That is the top of the Supreme Performance category, and I'm not sure anything's going to beat it out. Seriously, this thing is just fantastic all the way around. I love these. I've always loved these stupid things. Next up, we have the Hunter Light Support Tank, which is personally one of my favorite little light tanks. At 35 tons, this little tracked vehicle is a pretty darn good harasser. This variant in the 3058 book we're going to look at has 2 LRM-15s with Artemis 4 FCS. Okay, I'm happy with that. Are you happy with that? I'm happy with that. And always a battle value, again, I'm talking about battle value a bit more in this book than I usually, this video than I usually do, because the vehicle dichotomy here. This thing has a battle value of 480. That's it. You can bring a bunch of these to the battle with average crews and really wreck. So, yeah. And it's got armor enough to handle some return fire. It's not got a huge amount of armor. It's only got 4 tons of armor. But still, it is 4 tons of ferrofibrous armor, that is. It is still really, really darn good. And I like the way it looks. I've got like 4 of these or whatever, the old Iron Wind metal ones, just because they're nice. They're little tiny vehicles. You move them around the battlefield. They've got LRM racks. The one I tend to run in 3025 time frame or intro tech time frame has like medium lasers and LRM 10 and like flamers and stuff like that sticking all over. It's got like weapons in all directions on it. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, it's pretty darn good. This is definitely an above average performing tank, especially for its weight class. It only weighs 35 tons and it carries 215 racks. That's pretty darn good. It is slow at 4.6, but it's a long-range support thing. You don't need to be going fast with that. Next up, we've got the Pegasus Scout Hovertank. It's a hover vehicle, so it moves at 812. It's got a significant amount of armor at 6.5 tons, which is pretty darn good. And then it has 2 SRM-6 racks. Hey, I keep talking about 6 racks. 6 racks are good. Then it has a medium pulse laser, a big galactic probe, a Guardian ECM, and a tag. Hello, electronics powerhouse. Yeah, you're only an 812 Hover Scout, but that's still pretty darn. That's a heck of a lot better than our Centipede Scout Car we had earlier, isn't it? I mean, this thing's got the full electronics package and some weapons that aren't pulling it down, as well as armor tonnage. Yeah, the Pegasus is above average again. I am really tempted to put it for Supreme, but it's a hover vehicle, which means hover vehicles are very, very easy to make them have no motive go away. They pop. Their hover skirts pop very easily. But they also have the advantage of, hey, look, it's water. I'm over it. Next up, we have the Plainsman Medium Hovertank. This is faster than our Scout vehicle we just talked about, but it mounts similar weaponry. The prior one had 2 SRM-6s. This one has 2 SRM-6s. Instead of having any lasers, this thing has an SRM-2 rack instead on the front. Yay. It's faster at 914, but it also carries less armor. I'm going to count this as this one is pretty much an average performance. I like the weaponry loadout for the most part, but it's just not as good. It's faster, which is nice, but I'd much prefer the one with all the technology on it in the Pegasus Scout Hovertank with all the technology is much better in my opinion. Next up, we have the Striker Light Tank. Again, pretty interesting vehicle. We're this far through the vehicles if you look at the number we used so far, and we're still at 35 tons in the vehicle weights. Still very light. The Striker Light Tank is a wheeled vehicle, and I do believe it's our first wheeled vehicle we've encountered in the book so far. It carries an LRM-15 with Artemis 4 and a pair of Streak SRM-2s. It's not bad, honestly. It moves at 5'8" and has a not insubstantial 125 points or 7 tons of armor, which is pretty darn good. I mean, it can take an AC-20 round to any location and not go kaboom, which for a 35-tonner is not insubstantial. Thankfully, all the missiles are mounted in a turret as well, giving it some pretty good flexibility on the battlefield. I do wish it was more concentrated on one type of weapon, like either close range or long range, but it's fine as it is. I think that this thing, because it's a wheeled vehicle, it has a little bit more difficulty with handling other types of terrain, but it's a bit faster, so it's not bad. I think overall that the Striker is an average performing vehicle. Next up, we have the Goblin Infantry Tank. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? This is a tracked vehicle, 45 tons, so we just jumped 10 tons essentially. It moves at 4.6 only. It has a significant amount of armor at 9.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, giving it 170 points, which means like the front of it can take 2 AC-20 shells without going through. Well, hey, that's pretty darn good. The weaponry it loads out with is a large pulse laser, 2 machine guns, and an SRM-6 rack. I mean, I don't mind it at all. The large pulse lasers and the SRM-6 are pretty darn good. And it has an AMS, which is also not bad. Beneficially, it also carries enough cargo space for 3 tons of infantry. Again, I really, really wish it didn't have the machine guns so it could carry a full 4-man, 1 ton per guy battle armor squad. Those machine guns are a significant detractor. I know a lot of these things have machine guns because they're carrying infantry, so they should be able to kill infantry. No, you don't need that. You carry infantry, and then the other infantry can kill the other infantry. Or a battle mech with a bunch of machine guns, like, say, a Piranha can kill a bunch of infantry. Or battle masters have machine guns, and so, there are other ways beyond just the vehicles of carrying machine gun in the battle. And in so many of these vehicles, I'm seeing that 1-ton disparity of being really, really good at carrying battle armor, but they can't. Still, it is our first tracked. It's a combat transport. It's really kind of strange because it's really slow, so it doesn't get your infantry into the battle very fast. And I kind of think because of that, I mean, this is an infantry tank. It sounds like it should be taking the infantry in there. I think it's a little bit below average because it's not fast, and it doesn't carry quite the 4 tons I really like. I mean, 3 tons is fine. 3 tons is a very passable amount of infantry. But still, I think that if this thing was faster, or it had more infantry space, it'd be better. Or both. So, it's kind of a bizarre thing to me. It's like missing on a couple fronts. The benefit is the large pulse laser is pretty darn good on a tank, because large pulses are nice to be able to hit with. I'm going to put it in below average because it's so close to being what I want it to be, but it's not quite there. Next up we have the Regulator Hovertank. This is the hover friend to the Yellow Jacket. It's a 914, so it's faster than the Yellow Jacket, Hovertank with a single weapon. One Gauss rifle with 2 tons of ammunition. The Gauss rifle's in a turret. This thing is a wonderful monster. It's not super heavily armored, but it doesn't need to be at that kind of speed. In addition, it doesn't need to get too close to the battlefield because it has that Gauss rifle. So, zoom around and put some holes in things with the Gauss rifle. This is going to be going into the Supreme Performance category as well. No, you are right below the Yellow Jacket in my opinion. You're an amazing vehicle. Everyone loves you. Take that Gauss rifle and go win something. Next up we have our second Omni vehicle, the Bandit Hovertank. Again, this one does what I'm very appreciative of and has 4 fixed tons for infantry. Again, to reiterate and to beat the dead horse point, that's a battle armor unit. That's a 1 ton per guy battle armor unit. It's Inner Sphere standard battle armor. Perfect. It's a 914 hover tank. That's good. It's got significant amount of armor on this stupid thing. This thing is a well-protected hover tank. It is also clocking in at the highest weight of a hover vehicle at 50 tons. So it's beefy. But it carries 11 tons of armor. Which means that, again, on this thing, even the sides can take 2 AC-20 shells before it goes through. That's some good protection. The weapons loadouts, though, are a little bit lacking. The primary loadout carries a lot of medium lasers, machine guns, and SRM2s. Medium lasers are good. Machine gun, again, why? Interestingly, alt configuration A has just a PPC. That's actually not bad. I mean, you got a big old fast infantry carrier with a PPC to pop things with it. Okay. Alt config B carries 2 SRM4s and an SRM2. Why not just have 2 SRM6s? That'd be much better. Which is exactly what we see in alt config C, 2 SRM6s. It's like alt config B is the dumb version of alt config C. It's the, derp. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, the alt config B has the SRM2 in the front of the vehicle, whereas alt config C has both the SRM6s in the turret, which... Okay, I don't... Alt config D is a triple LRM5 mount. Okay, that's not bad. Alt config E is an LRM10 and medium laser. Okay. Alt config F is essentially kind of like the PPC variant, but it has a medium laser and a large laser, so a little bit more lasery, but not quite the range. Alt config G is actually really good as a point-blank fighter. It has 2 mediums and 6 small lasers. I mean, if you're going to go energy, kind of like energy, that one's not bad because you can really run up on something, put the battle armor right there, and then just be like hitting it with those small lasers when you're that close also. So that one I kind of like. And alt config H is like the more recent, like the Jihad era one that has an ER medium laser, a Streak SRM2, and an extra 4 tons of infantry. That one's a pretty darn good loadout. I think though, for this thing, this is a really good infantry deliverer. This is going to be an above average performing vehicle because it really gets up there. It weighs a lot to do that, but it's still really good. Next up we have the Fulcrum Hovertank. This is an interesting one. It's another 50-tonner. It's very fast though, moving at 10-15. It has 10 tons of armor, so 160 points. It's not quite as well armored as the Bandit. And we have a pretty simple weapons loadout. Large laser, medium laser, LRM-10, tag, and a Guardian ECM. The Guardian ECM alone, though, does give this thing some significantly good punch. And the other benefit is, everything but the tag is in a turret, so it can swivel those weapons around as it's moving at that high 10-15 speed. I do like it overall. I think it's a pretty darn good one. I think it's a slightly above average performing vehicle. Just slightly above. It's just barely getting into there. Next up we have the Maxim Hovertank. This one I have more issues with because it's only 812, but what's really lacking is the armor. It's only got 108 points of armor or 6 tons of armor, which is a bit light again. The other ones are much better armored. But it has a lot of guns. It's SRM 6, 2 Streaks 2s, 2 LRM 5, 2 machine guns, and a tag, and 3 tons of infantry. Again, if you're carrying infantry, make room for that 4th ton, just so you can fit in the battle armor. Yeah, standard platoon size 3 tons is not bad for infantry. I mean, there's some infantry that weighs up to 40 tons because it carries a field artillery piece, but nonetheless, this thing is not bad at all. But it's just lacking that. It doesn't have the speed or the armor capacity of the prior tanks. And part of the reason is because this thing has an internal combustion engine versus XL fusion or fusion engines. So it's using older technology. It's definitely going to be a lot cheaper if you're playing a game that uses C-bills. This one's going to be pretty darn affordable compared to the XL ones. And remember, in a vehicle, an XL engine doesn't mean jack. Really. It doesn't mean a thing. Unlike in a battle mech, where the XL engines eat up side torso slots and you can die more easily, in a vehicle, it's still just an engine. It's a bigger engine in a vehicle that has engine. So it doesn't matter. XL engines in vehicles just add C-bill cost. They don't actually make the vehicles any easier to kill. Vehicles already die easy enough through single shots. Any shot from the side that rolls an 8 is a possible tack on that side. So vehicles can go one shot and a vehicle can end its life. It's not too hard to roll an 8 followed by like an 11 or 12. So yeah, vehicles can die in one shot. Even the most heavy, beefy, burliest demolisher tanks out there can die with one solid shot. Just how vehicles work. They're riskier to run, but you tend to be able to, in certain variants, carry more for their bang, or they move faster, they move differently, or they're just really cheap to deal. Take them in swarms. That's vehicles. So, but the Maxim I think is really lacking. While it has a lot of weapons on it, it's lacking armor and speed to compensate for this because of the ice engine. So I'm going to give this in the below average performance category. Next up is the Vedette medium tank. The one in this book is not very good. I'm just going to say that before I get going very far. It's a track vehicle with an ice engine. Again, remember, internal combustion engines are slower, heavier. They don't work. They're not as good as Fusion or XL Fusion. It moves at 5'8", which isn't bad. It has 6.5 tons of armor, which could be better. Oh, and on a vehicle also, ferrofibrous armor doesn't do anything except for cost C-bills as well because they don't have critical slots. So any vehicle not mounting ferrofibrous armor is kind of wasting some armor. This thing, the real downside of this vehicle is it mounts as an Ultra AC5 and a ton of ammo in the turret. Later variants give this thing, I do believe, a Rack 5, and that is darn good. But not this variant. This variant is a very, very underperforming tank. It, on average rolls alone, if it hits, it does 5 points of damage for a 50-ton tank. Now, that's represented by its battle value. Its battle value is only 308. That is less battle value than a lot of battle armor platoons will have. I mean, this thing is incompetent. At this loadout, and 3058, it's an incompetent tank. It's a 5'8" with low armor and a single gun that has only enough ammo for 10 rounds of double tapping. And when it's double tapping, it may, on average rolls, it only does 5 damage anyways. So it's not a good tank at all. It is bad. This design is awful. Next up, we have the SRM/LRM Carrier. This thing is crazy. I mean, even if you go back in the years of 3025, when all the LRM Carrier does is mount 3 LRM 20 racks, and that's it, who cares? That's good. The SRM Carrier, 10 SRM 6 racks. My only issue with that is that sometimes the dice rolling for the SRM Carrier is painfully long. Still, this is a super slow vehicle. It moves at 2-3 for the LRM Carrier and 3.5 for the SRM Carrier. So they're darn slow. But the LRM Carrier's job is to literally get into place, fire missiles. Get into place, fire missiles. Stay in place, and fire missiles. Die while firing missiles. Because it has no armor. These things have 54 points of armor, 3 tons only. These things die fast. Thankfully, they don't have a turret to slap extra armor on. That's what the heavier carriers do. In another book, the heavy LRM carriers have the turrets that can... yeah. And these things weigh 60 tons. These things weigh 60 tons and they have the same armor as like a Locust. But again, it's just the weaponry. The LRM Carrier has 3 LRM-20s with Artemis 4 FCS and a C3 slave system. Put this thing as far away as possible to be able to hit your targets. 21 hexes roughly is the sweet spot for this thing. Get something in there that has the C3 network lined up. Get it short range and blow stuff up. Wow. The SRM Carrier has, this version in the book has 9 SRM racks and a NARC beacon rack, or NARC beacon launcher. Still, it's at the NARC, it's at the SRMs, it's not bad. I don't like it as much as the LRM one just because it doesn't have the ability to reach and touch. Oh, it can do a lot of damage. It can do a ton of damage. But you have to survive to the encounter, and it's slow. So, not as good, in my opinion. The SRM is not as good as the LRM. The SRM is great in certain situations when you're using hidden units, and someone walks into the hex of the SRM Carrier, and then they die. That's funny. But that doesn't happen that often. Let's admit this to ourselves. It's a super niche situation that doesn't happen very often. Next up is the Manticore heavy tank. 60-ton, tracked, fusion tank, 4.6 speed, not bad. 10 tons of ferrofibrous armor, okay. With a nice weapons load, large pulse laser, LRM-10 with Artemis 4, SRM-6 with Artemis 4, Streak SRM-2, meh, it's okay. I actually think the one from 3025 is actually better because it's got like an LRM-10, a PPC, an SRM-6, and that's all it really has. It doesn't need anything else, and that's good. That's darn good. Roughly the same armor at the time period. It's just a good tank overall. I mean, this is a pretty solid tank. I mean, I forgot to put the LRM Carrier in the SRM Carrier. The LRM Carrier, SRM Carrier average out to, in my opinion, an above average performance. Mainly because the LRM Carrier with that C3 slave should probably be in supreme performance, but I think the SRM Carrier is more niche, so probably it's an average performance, so averaging them out, it's above average. Now, the Manticore is going to be an average performing vehicle only, as sad as it is, because honestly, it's what a main battle tank should be. It's very average. It's right there. It's got good weaponry, but it's not stellar weaponry. It's got good enough speed, but not stellar speed, and not indulgently crappy speed. It's got good armor, but not an insane amount of armor. This is really an average vehicle, but that's good. That means this is what vehicles should never be worse than this. They should be right there. This is the kind of vehicle that you should see on the battlefield. Next up, we have the Poe heavy tank. This is roughly the same exact vehicle as the Manticore. It's a little bit lighter armor, same speed, but we've stripped out all the Manticore's weapons and replaced it with a single AC-10 and 2 machine guns. And the big difference is one thing again. The Poe has an ice engine, the Manticore has a fusion engine. It means the Poe is going to be cheaper, but it carries a lot less guns on it. It's just not very good. I mean, the Poe is a below average tank because of that. Later variants do get better, like Gauss rifles and a few things like that, but nah, it's just not so great. I mean, the only benefit of this thing is battle value is 360. It's super cheap in battle value. Next up, we have the Tokugawa heavy tank. I like the way this thing looks. It's a wheeled vehicle that comes in at 60 tons. It's a 4.6 with a fusion engine. And it's got 2 medium pulse lasers, an LB-10X in the turret, SRM-6 with Artemis 4 in the turret. The medium lasers are stuck in the front, which is not so hot, but that's okay. It's not bad. It's only got 10.5 tons of armor. Not ferrofibrous either, which is, again, why not? Why not ferrofibrous? Still, I like the way this thing looks. It's a pretty solid, heavy tank. It's got good enough weaponry. It could be a bit better, could be worse. Again, this is actually a pretty average tank, especially for a wheeled vehicle. My biggest issue with it is the fact that it has weird naming conventions later on. Like, this is a Tokugawa heavy tank. Like, later on you'll find like the Tokugawa 151, the Tokugawa 150. Those are actually earlier variants. Bit strange to me. But I think this is pretty much an average heavy tank. The turret kind of reminds me of a Dalek head, so that's kind of funny and kind of cool. Next up we have the Pilum heavy tank. The Pilum is a 70-tonner, it moves at 4.6 with the fusion engine. It has 10 tons of ferrofibrous armor. Yay, ferrofibrous! And it has 2 LRM 15s with Artemis 4 on both of them, 2 Streak 2s, and 2 medium pulse lasers. The 15s are in the turret, so are the Streaks, but again, I don't get why the Streaks are on there. They don't really serve much of a purpose on this thing. The medium pulses are in the front, which is a bit strange, but I accept it. It's not the best looking vehicle by a long shot. It kind of looks like an Oscar Mayer Wiener vehicle, I guess. Oscar Mayer hot dog vehicle in some ways. That's what I'm kind of seeing when I look at it. The 215s with Artemis 4 are pretty darn good. I'll give it that. But I think that this thing still falls into just being an average performing vehicle. Because it's wheeled in some ways, that is a bit of a downside. So the same on the Tokugawa. Next up, we have the Typhoon Urban Assault Vehicle. Now, I like this thing. This thing is kind of disgusting in some ways. It's got a couple of its own issues. I mean, again, it's a wheeled vehicle, so it's yay. But for where it's supposed to be playing, this is an urban assault vehicle. Wheels are usually pretty solid and pretty good. But the reason why the thing's nice is this thing mounts an AC-20 with 3 tons of ammo. It's got 2 Streak 2s. I know Streak 2s are very popular right now, but they're just not all that great. They're actually slightly worse than an SRM-4, I do believe. And 2 of them are only equivalent to an average SRM-6, so they don't have the ability to go higher. And SRM-6s, while they might roll a little bit lower, are usually better, in my opinion, overall for the higher damage potential. This thing also mounts 2 medium pulse lasers, and then an SRM-6. We had 2 Streak 2s and then an SRM-6. I always find the combination of slapping some Streak... Actually, I am totally off my rocker. This thing has 4 Streak SRM-2 racks. Yeah, whatever. I do like it, though, because of the AC-20. And all those SRMs and stuff like that are all in the same range bracket as the AC-20. So the AC-20 goes, opens a hole, and then the Streaks go, critical, critical, critical. You know, they're searching for that critical slot where that hole is punched into the enemy mech or whatever. I think the Typhoon, while it's a bit slow, qualifies as above average performance. Because it really does what its job is. It does good in cities. Next up we have the Brutus Assault Tank, which is a bit of a misnomer in my opinion. For one big reason. This thing is under-armored. This is a 75-ton tank with 136 points of armor. It sacrifices all that because it actually has a lot of weapons on it. It's got 2 large lasers, an LRM-20, 2 SRM-6s, and an SRM-2. Because as those large lasers, it needs to have the heat sinks in there, which thankfully it gets 10 of because it has a fusion engine, but it doesn't pay for 6 heat sinks. Because remember, in vehicles, your weapons must be heat neutral. If they are an energy weapon, you must have the heat compensation to have it in your vehicle. There's no options to ignore it and overheat. Vehicles cannot overheat. So if there's a weapon that generates heat, it must be compensated for by having heat sinks or having heat sinks. So yeah, that is one of the biggest issues for vehicles, is they have to be heat neutral. It does mean that running them is pretty easy because you never have to worry about your heat chart, but still, vehicles must be built heat neutral. I am going to put the Brutus as slightly below average because while it is a pretty good combat performer, offensively, it doesn't have the defense to hold up. And it being a 3.5, it's going to get hit. There's no way it's not going to get hit. Couple hits in the wrong way, this vehicle goes slow, goes immobile, and all those weapons are going to die. Because it doesn't have the armor. If it had the armor, it could, at least when it's been slowed down or immobilized, it'd still be a lethal turret on the battlefield, but without that armor, it's going to become immobilized and then dead. Next up is the Zhukov heavy tank. This is unfortunately an ice engine vehicle. It's got a speed of 3.5 and 11 tons of armor, so it's not badly armored. It's a lot better than the Brutus. And it's got an interesting weapons loadout. It mainly has 2 AC-10s. Has a 6 rack on it also, an SRM 6 rack. But still, it's mostly just a double AC-10 carrier. Thankfully, no turrets. The art is pretty cool on this thing. I like it. Overall, it's not bad. It's kind of, I think this is pretty much an average performing vehicle. It doesn't make me like jump up and down with, yay, amazing! It doesn't make me go, oh, depressing. It's an ice engine, so I'm a little bit depressed by it, but still it's cheap. And you get those 2 AC-10s out there, which is pretty good. They don't have a lot of ammo. They've only got 20 shots of ammo. So 10 rounds of firing, but it's a tank. It may not survive for 10 rounds. Next up, we have the Partisan Air Defense Tank. It's a 3.5 tank with a fusion engine, thankfully. It's got 8 tons of armor. It's ferrofibrous armor, so that's at least an improvement right there. At least it's got a little bit extra. So it's a little bit on the light side of the armor for a tank that weighs 80 tons. It's a little bit lightly armored. But it does have 2 LB-10Xs and 2 AC-2s. Not fond of the AC-2s, but it has 2 LB-10Xs. It also has a C3 Slave, making it good. That alone makes it pretty darn good. Because the C3 Slave means it's going to get some good ranges on those things. If you're not connected to the C3, it's not so great. But if you have the C3, it's pretty darn good. So, but the problem is, I think this thing actually just falls into exactly what it should be doing. It's an air defense tank. It does air defense. It's got C3, so it's average performing. It's not better than what it's supposed to be. Next up, we have the Challenger X MBT. That's also the Challenger 10 main battle tank. This thing is a 270 XL fusion engine, so it can go 3.5, because it is a 90-ton tank. Its armor factor is 14 tons of ferrofibrous armor. Hey, we're checking off 2 good boxes on a tank. XL for the extra weight, and ferrofibrous for more armor. And then you come to this thing's weapons loadout, and it's crazy good. Gauss rifle, LB-10X, LRM-10 with Artemis 4, an AMS. Okay, that's fine. 2 medium pulse lasers, 2 Streak SRM-2s, and then a small pulse laser. It's really the long-range things on this thing that make it shine. And it really is good. It's got the Gauss rifle, it's got the LB-10X, and it's got an LRM-10 rack, which is pretty good long-range weaponry. I wish it had a bit more. I wish it didn't have those close-range weaponry. I mean, I honestly don't think it needs the close-range weaponry. This thing should be a slow, long-distance main battle tank, just hammering away from distance. But it is a main battle tank. It does its job as a main battle tank. This is a good vehicle to spearhead with. And again, it's not above average in my opinion. Well, it is above average. I think this is going to qualify as an above average vehicle. It's really darn good as a main battle tank. It performs its job with aplomb. Yeah. I like it. It's a fun one to run. Sadly, we come up to the last vehicle in the whole list, which is the Ontos Heavy Tank. And I say sadly, because the problem that this 95-tonner has is a lack of armor. This is a big, weapons-loaded-out vehicle that moves at 3.5, but only has 170 points of armor. It's a little bit light on the armor. Now, it does have a lot of guns on it, so let's cover those weapons. It's got 4 medium lasers and 3 medium pulse lasers. It's got an LRM-15 with Artemis 4, an SRM-4 with Artemis 4, an SRM-6 with Artemis 4, and case. Yeah, it's a vehicle with case, so if the ammo does go up, it doesn't die. Still, it's slow at 3.5, so a lot of those guns have a 9 hex range or less. Only one thing reaches out and tickles it a further distance. this isn't a fast tank. It's not going to be always up in battle. And because of that, having all these point-blank weapons only on it, or close-distance weapons, seems not so good. It really needed more of a long-range punch than one LRM-15 rack with Artemis 4. I don't think this tank lives up to what a 95-ton assault tank should do. This is a below-average tank. If you get into the right situations where you are fighting within 9 hexes, it's pretty darn lethal. Even better if you're fighting within 6 hexes so you can bring those medium pulses to bear. But again, that's the problem. So much of this vehicle is restricted to only being combat effective at 9 hexes or less. And I just don't like that very much. And, by the way, every weapon is in the turret, which means that you can't, like, by pointing the main body of the tank to fire the LRM-15 somewhere else over there, and then fire your turret weapons or something completely. You have to have everything in the same arc when you bring that turret around. So your LRM-15s are now more limited to fighting in the same arc as your close range weapons. So I think that's another blow against it. This thing needed to divide up those weapons. Have one weapon, like the LRM-15, it should have been built into the body, and everything, like in the front, and everything else should have been built on the turret. It would have been better that way. Just a little bit better, but still a bit better. It's kind of a sad point to end on. This tank is just not, it's below average. Interestingly enough, there are no 100-ton tanks in this book. We spend a lot of time at the 35 and the 50-ton weight classes. Those are very popular. And we've come to the end of this one. We've got a pretty interesting spread. It's mostly above average. A good number of average and a few supreme performance. The supreme performance ones are ones that seem to excel at one particular thing, which is Gauss rifles or transporting. Still, it's fun to talk about vehicles for the first time. I don't think we've been talking about Vs a lot. I've not talked about Vs very much before, and I do use them quite a bit in my games. And again, we've come to the end of this video. So this is SleeplessRonin saying, do the YouTube things. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below. As per usual, the tier list will be linked in the description. Go and play with it yourself and see how you feel about these things. And that's it for this video. We'll see you next time. Sayonara.